It was the scream that scared me, that guttural sound I had never heard before. I was sitting on the stairs with his bedroom door ajar, waiting. 15 minutes earlier, I had sneaked into the bathroom and done what I needed to do. The industrial glue was still in my pocket when I heard that roar of pain. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. Mine was served hot and sticky. And yes, I smiled when I heard that scream. My name is Miguel. I'm 19 now. I'm sitting in this empty square because sometimes I need air, space, distance from everything and everyone. I spent the last 2 years in a rehabilitation center for juvenile offenders for something that many would consider monstrous: a premeditated assault with the intent to cause permanent damage. That's how the judge described it. But no one knew what went on behind the 4 walls of that house. No one asked why a 16-year-old boy would do something so extreme to his own grandfather. I'm not here to justify myself or to ask for forgiveness. I'm here because I need to tell this story, because there are truths that need to be heard, even if only in whispers, even if only between the lines. My grandfather Augusto was respected in the community, a man of traditional values. As everyone said, a patriarch, the pillar of the family. No one would ever suspect what happened when we were alone. What began when I was just 11 years old and only ended when I made a decision that would change my life forever. But before I continue, I need to ask you something. If you're really paying attention, if you can feel the weight of the words I'm about to share, help me not to be just another forgotten statistic. Like this video now. Subscribe to the Traumatic Testimonials channel. Turn on the bell so you don't miss any stories like mine, and comment on where you're watching this from. It seems simple, but for someone like me, knowing that you're listening, that you're really listening, means more than you can imagine. And believe me, what I'm about to tell you will change the way you see those smiles in family photos. Because behind every smile, there may be a story that no one can imagine. So, are you with me? Are you ready to hear what no one wanted to hear for years? My childhood began like that of any normal child. I lived with my parents in a simple but cozy house on the outskirts of Puebla. My father, Carlos, worked as a truck driver and spent weeks on the road. My mother, Lucia, did her best to keep everything in order with her job as a domestic worker. We didn't have much, but we were happy in our own way. Everything changed when my mother was in a car accident when I was 10 years old. She survived, but was left with injuries that prevented her from working for a long time. The bills began to pile up, and my father needed to take more trips, being away even more. It was at that moment that my paternal grandfather, Augusto, offered to help. "Let the boy stay with me while you recover financially," he suggested. My parents saw this as a blessing. Augusto had been a widower for 5 years. He had a large, comfortable house in the Roma neighborhood and always seemed to love me very much. He was the grandfather who brought gifts on birthdays, who told interesting stories, who had that aura of wisdom that grandparents often have. At first, it was even fun. His house had a huge yard with trees to climb, a TV bigger than ours, and he always had candy hidden in strategic places throughout the house. Our little secret was about the chocolates he gave me at odd hours. I didn't know that would be the first of many phrases about secrets I would hear in the years to come. The first few months were quiet. I went to school, came home, did my homework, and my grandfather treated me well. On weekends, my parents came to visit me. My mother was still recovering, using crutches with a constant look of pain on her face. My father looked increasingly tired, with deep circles under his eyes. I understood that they were struggling, and I didn't want to be an additional problem. "Is everything okay here with Grandpa?" my mother would always ask. "Everything's great," I would reply, and I really believed that at first. It was after I turned 11 that I began to notice subtle changes in my grandfather's behavior. First, it was the long, strange looks that made me uncomfortable. Then the way he started accidentally walking into the bathroom when I was showering. "The old door doesn't close properly," he would say, but he would take a long time to leave. Soon came the seemingly innocent touches that lasted too long. A hand on my shoulder that slid down my back, a hug that squeezed me in a different way. The way he sat very close to me on the sofa when we watched TV. I started having trouble sleeping. I developed the habit of pushing the dresser against my bedroom door before going to bed. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, I would hear the sound of the doorknob turning softly. My heart would race, and I would pretend to be fast asleep, praying that the dresser was heavy enough, but it wasn't. One night, he managed to push the door hard enough to move the furniture. He came into my room and sat on the edge of the bed. I pretended to be asleep, my heart almost jumping out of my mouth. He just sat there staring at me for what seemed like an eternity. Then he whispered, "I know you're awake, Miguel. You don't have to be afraid of Grandpa." It was that night that the real nightmare began. The nightmare I carry silently to this day. I won't go into detail about what happened. Some things are so dark that even after years, I can't name them. I only know that I cried silently until dawn. The next day, I tried to call my mother, but my grandfather was always nearby, listening to every word. "I miss you so much." That was all I could say, hoping she would notice something in my voice. But she was busy with her own pain. "We'll be together again soon, son. Hang in there a little longer." Hanging in there is what I did for years. At school, my performance plummeted. From model student to problem child in a matter of months. My teachers noticed it clearly. One of them, Ms. Fernanda, even called me in to talk. "Miguel, is something going on? Can you tell me?" I opened my mouth, but the words wouldn't come out. The fear was greater because my grandfather had been very clear. "If you tell anyone, I'll say you're lying to get attention." Who do you think they're going to believe? Me? The respected grandfather, or a troubled child? Besides, my family depended on his help. My mother was still undergoing treatment. My father was working 2 jobs to pay off the medical bills. I was just a kid, but I understood enough to know that I couldn't cause any more trouble. So I shut myself off, isolated myself, and put up a wall. On visiting days, I smiled at my parents. I told them everything was fine, that I was just tired from school. They noticed something was wrong, but they attributed it to the stress of change, to homesickness. "You'll be back soon," they always said. But that soon turned into years. By the age of 13, I had become a different person. The cheerful, curious child had become a quiet, sullen teenager, always looking down. I started to self-harm, small cuts hidden under long sleeves, physical pain that somehow briefly relieved the pain in my soul. It was around that time that I discovered my grandfather's diary, a black notebook hidden at the bottom of his sock drawer. I read pages that confirmed my worst nightmare. I wasn't the first. There were others before me. Distant cousins, neighbors, even a grandnephew. All young children who for some reason had spent time in that house. That was also when I discovered the condoms. My grandfather, always careful, used them not out of concern for me, but to leave no evidence. I read in his diary how proud he was of his prudence, how it had saved him from trouble in the past. At that point, something began to change inside me. It was no longer just fear and shame. It was a cold, calculating, growing rage. A rage that kept me awake at night, planning a rage that gave me the strength to survive another day. A rage that would eventually turn into action. The years between 13 and 15 became a blur of pain, fear, and silent rage. The routine established by my grandfather was calculatedly perfect for hiding what was happening from the outside world. We were just a devoted grandfather and his troubled teenage grandson. Miguel is a difficult boy. He would tell the neighbors when I refused to leave my room to interact with visitors. "Adolescence, you know how it is, but I'm doing the best I can." And everyone believed him. Why wouldn't they believe him? Augusto Ramirez, Lou Sherba, ex-military, widower, dedicating his retirement years to helping the family. A man who went to Mass on Sundays, participated in community events, donated to charities, the perfect model citizen. Meanwhile, inside that house, I lived in a constant state of alert. I learned to recognize the signs when he drank a little more during dinner, when he watched certain television programs with that specific look, when he made seemingly innocent comments about how I was growing strong. Each of those signs was a harbinger of what would come later when the lights went out. I developed rituals to protect myself, even though I knew they were useless. I slept dressed in several layers of clothing, even in the heat. I placed noisy objects near the door to serve as an alarm. I would spend entire nights sitting in the corner of the room with my back to the wall, fighting sleep. At school, my behavior deteriorated more and more. Fights, aggressive responses to teachers, bad grades. They called me problematic, rebellious, rude. No one suspected that this was the only way I had found to cry out for help. A new teacher, Ms. Sophia, was the only one who seemed to see beyond the facade. After I exploded in anger during her class over something trivial, she didn't send me to the principal's office like others would have. Instead, she asked me to stay after class. "Miguel, I'm going to ask you one question, and I want you to be honest," she said, looking me straight in the eye. "Is someone hurting you?" I felt my whole body shaking. The words stuck in my throat. It was the opportunity I had been waiting for, but the fear was paralyzing. What if no one believed me? What if my family was harmed? "No," I replied, looking away. "No one is hurting me." She didn't insist, but she handed me a piece of paper with a phone number on it. "It's a helpline. You can call anytime. You don't have to give your name if you don't want to." I kept that piece of paper for weeks, looking at it every night, imagining what would happen if I called, but I never had the courage. When I was 15, I received the news that my mother was finally better, and that my father had found a more stable job. They were ready to take me back home. It should have been the happiest day of my life. "We'll pick you up next weekend," my father said on the phone. "We've already fixed up your room. Your mother talks about nothing else." For the first time in years, I felt a spark of hope. 1 week. I just needed to hold on for one more week, and then I would be free. Free from that house, that room, those hands. My grandfather overheard the conversation. I saw his face change when he realized what was happening. That gentle smile he showed the world turned cold and calculating when we were alone. "It seems our time together is coming to an end, Miguel," he said with terrifying calm. "We should make the most of it, don't you think?" The following days were the worst. As if he knew that his power over me had an expiration date, Augusto intensified everything. The fear I felt before turned into pure terror. I stopped sleeping completely. I ate only when it was absolutely necessary. I was living in a state of constant dissociation, as if I were observing my own life from outside my body. 3 days before my parents were due to pick me up, he crossed a line that even he had never crossed before. The pain was so intense, so dehumanizing, that something inside me just broke. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. It was as if a part of me died in that moment, and another part, cold, calculating, determined, was born in its place. That night, when I was finally alone, I took a bath that lasted 4 hours. I scrubbed my skin until it was red, as if I could cleanse not only my body, but also my memory, the feel of his hands, his smell. And it was during that bath that I saw the box of condoms in the bathroom cabinet again, the box he kept there as a precaution. And then, like a flash, the idea came to me. My grandfather was methodical in his habits, predictable. I knew exactly when and how he would act. I knew he would be drinking his favorite whiskey that night, as he did every Tuesday. I knew he would call me to talk around 10 p.m. I knew which condoms he would use. Always the same ones, always from the same place. What he didn't know was that I had learned to be patient, to plan, to wait for the right moment. The next morning, I left for school early, but instead of going to class, I went to the hardware store in the neighboring neighborhood. The salesman looked at me suspiciously when I asked for the strongest industrial glue they had. "School project," I explained, forcing a smile. He didn't ask any more questions. I returned home before my grandfather arrived from the retirement center, where he spent his mornings. I took the small tube of glue out of my pocket and went straight to the bathroom. With trembling hands, I took one of the condoms out of the box. Carefully, I applied a thin layer of glue to the inside. Then I put it back in the box exactly as it was before. I did the same with 2 more to be sure. Then I waited. The hours dragged on. Every minute seemed like an eternity. When night finally came, I pretended to be tired and went to my room early. I listened to the familiar sounds of the house, the TV on with the evening news, the clinking of ice in a whiskey glass. Heavy footsteps in the hallway. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my heart beating so hard it felt like it was going to explode. I didn't know exactly what would happen. I hadn't planned beyond that moment. I just knew that something needed to change and that I would be the agent of that change. At 10:03 p.m., I heard his footsteps approaching my room. The door opened slowly, as it had so many other nights. I kept my eyes closed, pretending to be asleep. I felt his weight sink into the mattress as he sat on the edge of the bed. The smell of whiskey was strong. Miguel whispered, "I know you're awake. Let's talk in my room. I have something special for our penultimate day together." I opened my eyes slowly, trying to look sleepy and scared as usual, but something had changed in me. The fear was still there, of course, but now something stronger was taking over. Anticipation. "I'm tired." "Ah," I muttered. "Come on," he insisted, his gentle tone contrasting with the firm grip on my arm. "Just a little. I promise it will be quick today." I got up, staggering on purpose to buy some time. My plan until then had been to simply apply the glue and wait for something to happen. But now, realizing we were about to enter his room, I had a better idea. A refinement of the original plan. "Can I use the bathroom first?" I asked in a small voice, the same voice he was used to hearing during his mission. "Sure," he replied with that fake benevolent smile on his face. "I'll wait for you inside." In the bathroom, I acted quickly, opened the box of condoms, and double-checked the 3 I had prepared. They were exactly where I had left them, but now, instead of leaving them for him to choose at random, I took all 3 and put them in my pajama pocket. Then I took 3 more regular condoms and scattered them over the others in the box so it would look like nothing had been touched, but making sure he would take one of the tampered ones. Then I washed my face with cold water, trying to calm my rapid breathing. In the mirror, I saw a face I barely recognized, sunken eyes with deep circles from crying so much in secret. Cheekbones protruding from the weight loss of the last few months, lips dry and cracked from being bitten so much to stifle screams. "It ends today," I whispered to my reflection. I left the bathroom and walked slowly down the hall. His bedroom door was ajar, a strip of yellowish light escaping into the dark hallway. I paused for a moment, my heart beating so hard I could feel it in my ears. Part of me wanted to run away, run out the front door, and never look back. But where would I go? And what would happen to the next child who crossed my grandfather's path? No, it had to be today. It had to be now. I gently pushed the door open and went in. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, already shirtless, the glass of whiskey almost empty on the nightstand. "You're late," he said, patting the space next to him. "Come sit here." I obeyed, keeping my eyes down, as I always did. The ritual was always the same. First, he would start with a seemingly normal conversation about school, about the day, as if he were genuinely interested in my life. as if this were a normal grandfather-grandson relationship. "Your parents are coming the day after tomorrow," he said, putting his arm around my shoulders. "Are you going to miss Grandpa?" I swallowed. "I think so." "You don't sound very convinced." He laughed, but there was tension in his voice. "After all I've done for you." His hands began to move, and I forced myself not to react, not to pull away, as my body begged me to. I needed everything to seem normal. I needed him to follow his usual routine exactly. After a few minutes of this torment, he got up and went to the dresser drawer. As I had anticipated, the critical moment had arrived. I sat up straighter in bed, watching closely as he opened the box and chose one. For a terrible moment, I thought he would take one of the normal ones. But then his hand stopped exactly on one of the ones I had prepared. "Why don't you get ready while I go to the bathroom?" he suggested, taking the condom and walking toward the bathroom adjoining the bedroom. As soon as the bathroom door closed, I got up quietly. The initial plan was simply to wait for the glue to take effect, but suddenly I was afraid that something would go wrong. What if the glue wasn't strong enough? What if he noticed before using it? I ran quietly to the bedroom door. I grabbed my backpack from the hallway and took out the tube of glue. I went back and hid it under the pillow. A plan B in case the first one failed. I sat back down on the bed, trying to look exactly as I had when he left. I heard the sound of water running in the sink. He was washing his hands as he always did. He would be back soon. The seconds dragged on. Every beat of my heart felt like a hammer. Every breath was conscious, forced. And then it finally happened. The scream came first, a high-pitched, almost inhuman sound. Then a thud, as if something heavy had fallen. But what the hell is this? I heard him roar from the bathroom. More noises, water running hard. Another scream, this time in pain. "Miguel, Miguel." The bathroom door flew open. My grandfather was there, his face contorted in an expression that mixed pain and fury. A towel wrapped around his blood-stained waist. "What did you do?" he roared, advancing toward me. "What did you do, you little brat?" I should have been terrified. I should have begged for forgiveness, tried to run away. But instead, I felt a strange calm wash over me, as if I were watching the scene from outside my body. "I don't know what you're talking about," I replied, my voice strangely firm. He stepped forward and grabbed me by the shoulders, shaking me violently. "You touched my condoms? It was you." His face was so close I could smell the whiskey on his breath. His hands squeezed my shoulders hard enough to leave marks, but I didn't feel afraid. Not at that moment. "Let go of me," I said calmly, "or I'll scream so loud the neighbors will hear me." He let go as if he had been burned, taking a step back. The fury on his face gave way to disbelief. You wouldn't do that." "I would," I replied, getting up from the bed. "And I would tell everything about all the nights, about all the other children in your diary." His eyes widened. "You read I read everything." I interrupted. "I know about all of them. I know what you did, and now you're bleeding." He looked down at the stained towel and then at me, the reality of his situation finally sinking in. It wasn't just the physical pain or the blood that worried her. It was the fact that she would need medical help. And how would he explain that kind of injury? You're going to regret this," he muttered, his voice now weak. "Your word against mine. Who do you think they're going to believe?" "Maybe you," I replied honestly. "Or maybe the pages of your diary that I photographed with the school cell phone and sent to my email." It was a lie. I hadn't photographed anything, but he didn't know that. The color drained from his face. "You didn't do that." "My parents are coming to pick me up tomorrow." I continued to feel a strength grow inside me with every word. "I'm leaving here, and you're never going to touch me again. Never again." He staggered backward until he leaned against the wall. The physical pain seemed to be getting worse. "I need to go to the hospital," he muttered. "Then go," I replied, walking toward the door, and good luck explaining what happened. I left the room and went straight to mine, locking the door behind me. I pushed the dresser against it as I did every night and sat on the bed, shaking uncontrollably. What happened next was a confusing sequence of events. I heard him moving down the hall, moaning in pain, the front door opening and closing, his car starting and speeding away. I thought I was finally sure he had gone to the hospital and that I would have peace at least until the next morning. I was wrong. 3 hours later, the front door opened again. Heavy footsteps down the hallway. A knock on my bedroom door. "Open this door," his voice thundered. There was no longer the tone of pain, only pure rage. I curled up in bed, my heart racing. "Go away or I'll call the police," I shouted, my voice trembling, betraying my fear. "You're going to pay for this," he yelled, pounding on the door. "Open up or I'll break it down." The doorknob turned frantically. The door shook with each blow. The dresser began to move. In a panic, I grabbed my cell phone. I didn't have enough credit to make a call, but I could fake one. "I'm on the line with the police," I yelled. "They're listening to everything." For a moment, the banging stopped. Silence. I thought it had worked. Then, a crash. The door exploded inward, the dresser falling on its side. And there he was in the doorway, his face contorted in pure hatred, a hammer in his hand. "You ruined everything," he growled, advancing. What happened next was pure survival instinct. He advanced with the hammer raised. I threw myself to the side, rolling off the bed onto the floor. The hammer struck the pillow where my head had been a second before. He turned toward me, raising the hammer again. I backed up until I hit the wall with no way out. "Your father said you were a good boy." He spat out the words, "that I would be proud to have you here. And look what you did." What I did. The words escaped my mouth before I could hold them back. Years of silent rage, finally finding release. "And what did you do every night, all these years?" He hesitated for a moment, surprised by my outburst. It was enough. I lunged to the side, slipping under his arm and running for the door. He spun around quickly, grabbing my shirt and pulling me back hard. I fell to the floor, hitting my head on the corner of the dresser. The pain was immediate, followed by a damp heat running down my 100. "I'll teach you what happens to ungrateful grandchildren," he hissed, dragging me across the floor. I fought, kicked, scratched, but he was much stronger. Years of military training had given him a strength that age had not completely diminished. With a sudden movement, he lifted me up and threw me against the wall. The impact knocked all the air out of my lungs. That's when I saw the tube of industrial glue that had fallen from the pillow during the fight. It was just a few inches from my hand. As he approached again with the hammer raised, I reached out and grabbed the tube. "The game is over," he said in a strangely calm voice. "Now you're going to learn... I didn't let him finish. With a quick movement, I uncapped the tube and squirted the contents directly into his face as he leaned over me. The scream that followed was worse than anything I had ever heard before. He dropped the hammer and brought his hands to his eyes, staggering backwards. The glue had mainly hit his forehead and one of his eyes. He screamed unintelligible words of pain and rage. I seized the opportunity and ran out of the room down the hallway, stumbling in the darkness. I made it to the kitchen, frantically searching for the phone. I needed to call someone, anyone. But before I could reach the phone, I felt a violent impact on my back. He had followed me, blind in one eye, and thrown something at me. I later discovered it was a glass paperweight that had been on the table in the hallway. I fell onto the kitchen table, knocking over plates and cutlery that were there. One of the kitchen knives slid and stopped near my hand. My grandfather staggered into the kitchen, one hand still covering his injured eye, the other outstretched in front of him, feeling his way. "I'm going to kill you," he growled. "I'm going to kill you and say you went crazy, that you tried to attack me and I defended myself." He continued forward, each step calculated. Despite his compromised vision, I backed up until I felt the cold kitchen wall against my back. There was nowhere to go. That's when my hand found the knife lying on the floor. "Stay away from me," I warned in a trembling voice. He laughed, a guttural, sinister sound. "Or are you going to stab me? You don't have the guts. Please," I begged one last time. "Just let me go." "You're not going anywhere," he replied, taking another step forward. What happened next remains in my memory as a sequence of disconnected flashes. He advanced. I raised the knife in a purely defensive gesture. He lunged at me. There was resistance. Then a smooth slide, a wet sound, warmth in my hands, and then silence. My grandfather looked at me with a look of surprise. His mouth open and a perfect O, he looked down at his own abdomen, where the knife had penetrated to the hilt. "You," he murmured, his voice now barely a whisper. "You really?" His legs gave way and he fell to his knees, still looking at me with that incredulous expression. Then he collapsed to one side, the knife still stuck in his abdomen. I stood frozen, watching the red stains spread rapidly across his shirt. My hands were shaking violently, covered in blood. His blood? The world around me seemed to slow down, each second stretching out endlessly. I don't know how long I stood there motionless, just watching. It could have been a few minutes, it could have been an hour. At some point, my brain finally processed what had happened, and I began to act mechanically. I picked up the phone and dialed 911. When they answered, my voice came out strangely calm. "I need help. I just stabbed my grandfather. He tried to kill me." The operator asked several questions, but I answered them all with the same calm and real tone. I gave the address and hung up. Then I sat down on the kitchen floor at a safe distance from the body and waited. The police arrived first, followed by the ambulance. I was taken to the police station while the paramedics tried to revive my grandfather. I learned that he arrived at the hospital alive, but died during surgery. The wound had punctured his liver and caused severe internal bleeding. The next day, when my parents arrived at the police station, I was in shock. I couldn't speak, I couldn't cry. I just stared into space, reliving those final moments over and over in my mind. It was during the investigation that everything came to light. The police found my grandfather's diary. Detailed entries of years of abuse, not only against me, but against other children before me. They also found photographs hidden in a false compartment at the back of the closet. Irrefutable evidence of what he was, of what he had done. Medical examinations confirmed years of physical abuse on my body. Marks, scars, evidence that even I didn't know I carried. Still, I had taken a life. At 16, I was a murderer. The judge took all the circumstances into consideration. The prosecution acknowledged self-defense, but argued that the use of industrial glue showed premeditation. The defense alleged prolonged trauma and dissociation. In the end, I was sentenced to 2 years in a juvenile rehabilitation center with mandatory psychological counseling. A lenient sentence, they said, considering the circumstances. But no sentence could be heavier than the one I already carried inside me. The first few months in the rehabilitation center were the most difficult. I spent weeks in virtual silence, speaking only when absolutely necessary. At night, the nightmares came without fail. Sometimes it was my grandfather chasing me through the hallways of the house. Other times it was me, with bloody hands, looking in a mirror and seeing his face reflected instead of mine. The center psychologist, Dr. Alina, was tireless. At first, I refused to talk during the sessions. I would sit staring at my own hands, reliving the moment when they were covered in blood. She didn't pressure me. She just said at the end of each fruitless session, "I'll be here when you're ready to talk, Miguel." It was only in the third month that the words finally started to come out. A floodgate that once opened released a deluge. I talked for hours, days, weeks, about the years of abuse, about the constant fear, about the rage that grew inside me until it became unrecognizable, about that final night and the emptiness I felt afterward. "I should feel guilty for killing someone," I said to him once. "Why don't I?" "Prolonged trauma affects our ability to process emotions normally," he explained. "What you are feeling or not feeling is a protective response from your brain." During this period, my parents visited me religiously every week. My mother cried a lot during the first visits, repeating it like a mantra. We didn't notice how we allowed this to happen. My father, on the other hand, carried a heavy silence, a guilt that seemed to physically crush him. He had confided in his own son, his father, who he now knew had also abused him as a child, a secret he had carried for decades, convinced that he was the only one, that his father had changed. "I thought I had gotten over it," he confessed to me during a visit when we were alone. "I thought they were just childhood nightmares, something I made up." He always said I made up stories. That revelation explained so much: my father's emotional distance, his constant absence, his long trips. He was running away not only to work, but to stay away from that house, from those memories. "I never imagined he would do the same to you." His voice faltered. "Never, if I had known." For the first time since I entered the center, I cried not for myself, but for my father. For that child he once was, carrying the same weight I now carried. The other young people at the rehabilitation center treated me with a mixture of caution and respect. Most were there for drug-related crimes or theft. A murderer, even in self-defense, was something different. There was a boy, Luis, who approached me after a few months. He was therefore stabbing his stepfather, who beat his mother. "We're alike, you know," he said to me one day as we shared a table at lunch. We did what was necessary. It was the first friendship I formed there. We weren't exactly close. We both carried walls too high around us to allow for true intimacy. But there was a mutual understanding, a silent acknowledgement of shared experiences. Group therapy was another challenge. Sitting in a circle with other young people and sharing personal stories seemed like a refined form of torture to me. In the early sessions, I just listened to stories of abandonment, violence, lives shattered even in childhood. When I finally shared my story, a summarized version without the darker details, I realized I wasn't the only one carrying invisible scars. Each of those young people had their own version of hell. Each had found different ways to survive. At the end of my first year there, Dr. Alina suggested that I start writing a journal. Poems, stories, anything that would help me express what I was feeling. I started with small notes, random phrases, fragmented memories. Over time, those notes turned into entire pages. I wrote about the before, the during, and the after, about the house that was my prison for years, about how the smell of whiskey still makes me nauseous, about the guilt I don't feel for taking a life, but I do feel for not speaking up sooner, for not preventing other children from going through the same thing. In my last month at the center, Dr. Alina gave me a book called Survivors of Trauma. "You are not alone on this journey," she wrote on the first page. "And it doesn't end here." She was right. The journey didn't end when I left the center 6 months ago. It continues every day, in every nightmare. In every startle, when someone touches my shoulder unexpectedly, in every relationship I'm afraid to form. I now live with my parents in a different city where no one knows our story. I am finishing high school at a new school. I have a therapist I see twice a week. I am trying day after day to rebuild some kind of normalcy. Sometimes when I sit alone, like now in this empty plaza, I wonder who I would have become if none of that had happened. What kind of person would I be if I hadn't spent years in the dark? If I didn't have blood on my hands before I could even drive? Other times I wonder about the other children, those who came before me, mentioned in the diary. Where are they? How did they survive? Do they carry the same scars as me? The police investigation located some of them, now adults with their own families, their own secrets. Some denied everything, unable to face the truth. Others confirmed statements that corroborated mine. One of them had committed suicide years earlier, leaving a letter that never mentioned my grandfather by name, but described in terrifying detail what he had suffered at the hands of someone who should have protected him. I don't know if I'll ever be truly normal. I don't know if the memories will ever completely disappear or if the nightmares will ever stop. But I know I survived. I know that despite everything that was taken from me, I am still here. My mother says I am strong. My father says I am brave. My therapist says I am resilient. I don't know what I am. I only know that I am still trying to find out. If you've made it this far and understood what I went through, if my story touched something inside you, please like this video. Subscribe to the Traumatic Testimonials channel, and turn on the bell so you don't miss other stories like mine. And if it's not too much to ask, comment what time it is now as you're watching this. It may seem strange, but it helps me remember that there is a real world out there with real people living their lives at different times of the day. It helps me feel connected, even if it's from a distance, even if it's through a screen. I don't know if I did the right thing that night. I don't know if there was another way out. I only know that at that moment, with that industrial glue in my hands, I chose to survive. And every day since then has been a continuous choice to keep surviving, to try to find something beyond survival. Maybe one day I'll find it. Maybe one day survival will turn into real life. Until then, I keep walking. One step at a time, one day at a time, one breath at a time. This is my story. It's not pretty. It doesn't have a happy ending, at least not yet, but it's true. And sometimes the truth is all we have left when everything else has been taken from us.